What's up, wedding filmmakers? Jason here, and we're here to... I've said this so many times. Everybody always likes to buy new lights. How about new tiny lights? Is it the G6? G60? We got the in the X100. Gotta say it with conviction. What's up, wedding filmmakers? Jason here from Wedding Film School, and I'm excited to talk to you about the new lights from Zhiyun, the G60 and the X100. I'm being lit right now by the X100. And actually, I think they're probably the perfect light for a lot of people out there. The question is, are they perfect for wedding filmmaking? Mess that up. Oh. Yeah, that's maybe the reason they're not perfect for wedding filmmaking, but we'll check that out in the full review. Stay tuned. This is the G60 and the X100 by Zhiyun, and these lights are weird. They're tiny, they're flat, but they're also super innovative and a lot of fun. The question is, are they awesome for weddings? So when it comes to lighting, it seems like a lot of these manufacturers, they're trying to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And I'm feeling like, I don't think you can get any smaller than this Zhiyun G60. This thing is minute. It is so tiny. I remember seeing the G60, the X100 around the internet for a couple weeks and thinking like, these are gonna change the game for wedding filmmakers. Tiny size, tons of power. It has the ability to mount a Bowens mount on it. Quite literally, you just can't find a much smaller light. And of course, they're both kind of stunning. They're very unique. And I mean, look at this thing. This looks more like a camera than a light. Let's look at the features and let's look at what they have in common first. Well, pretty much only one thing they both have in common, which is they both have the new Zy mount system, which is really actually really cool system. And luckily, if you get the combo pack, it has an included Bowens mount, which is really great because a lot of us have Bowens mount accessories. First, let's look at the G60. This thing, first of all, is just tiny, tiny, tiny. It is so tiny. I've literally never seen a monolight this small, and I have a Nanlite Forza 60. I have the Amaron 60, all kinds of tiny little lights, and this is the tiniest of them all. Has a built-in yoke right here, which is really great. Allows you to tilt it and things like that. Brightness, color, temperature here on the back. Has the ability to take an external power source via USB-C, something like a V-mount or whatever you want to use, and has Bluetooth connectivity to the new Zy Vega app. On the G60, we have a CCT range from 2700 kelvins all the way to 6500 kelvins, and with a CRI rating of 96. Lumens on this are around 2300 lux. When you add the reflector though, you're actually getting up to 11,000 lux on this little guy. The X100 is the bigger brother of the G60. It has 100 watts of output, this very unique form factor. The X100 has a CCT range from 2700 kelvins to 6500 kelvins with a CRI rating of about 95. Of course, the X100 is a lot brighter than the G60, so it's around 3800 lux on the output, which is pretty cool. When you add the reflector, you're talking 17,000 lux for the X100. The other thing that they developed was this custom battery right here. Basically, it makes it look like a camera. Check this out. Smile. I think a lot of people are going to find this battery to be actually one of the most polarizing features about this light. First, the good things about this battery, it's kicking out full power for the entire duration of its use, and it clicks right on, and it feels really high quality. It has 30 minutes of 100% output max, and it just like dies, as you saw in the intro. Like when you get to that 30 minutes, it's dead. So now that we talked about the features, I think I want to get into something that is a little more philosophical, which is, who is this light for? Who are they targeting with this light? It's really content creators. Neither of them are really that bright for a commercial setting, although you might be able to use them for practicals or some small interviews. And neither of them are really quite ideal for weddings, although I believe you could use them in a pinch. If you are a content creator and you're looking for some lights, these would actually work really, really well for you. Upon further inspection with both of these lights though, I think they might be a little ahead of their time. So this is the Aputure 60X. This is the current king of lights for wedding filmmakers. This is a focusable bicolor light, and of course you can power it via D-tap on any kind of V-mount battery, because right on the yoke right here, you can put a V-mount battery. This thing is awesome. It's really great. I highly recommend it. In my opinion, any light I'm gonna get for weddings has to be able to beat this light in every category. Let's just look at the brightness. Let's put this light directly next to an LS60X. And you know what we're also gonna do? We're gonna add a Fresnel attachment to the Bowens mount and see if that helps with the brightness and helps it compete with the LS60X. Here in this scenario, we have the G60, the X100, and the LS60X. Both the G60 and the X100 are mounted with reflectors and the aperture is fully spotted. We did this test starting at 20 feet from the light in increments of 10 feet. So we did 30, 40, 50. As you can see, the G60 and the X100 have significant fall off. Now that we've seen how both of these lights compare to the Aputure 60X out of the box, let's add a Fresnel attachment using the Bowens adapter and see if it adds any performance to the G60 and the X100. As you can see, it's pretty similar actually at 140 feet to this Aputure 60X right here. I think you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference really in brightness, to be honest. Do you need a Fresnel with these lights to shoot weddings? Here's my opinion, yes, you do. Without the Fresnel, the X100 can kind of keep up with the 60X, but once you start getting into a distance, I think you start to see the difference. But the G60 is just wiped out. It is useless. Once you add the Fresnel, the X100, I think you would be hard pressed to really tell the difference between the brightness on the X100 and the 60X. And actually, the G60 with the Fresnel, I think it's pretty useful at a wedding. I mean, even at 40 feet, I think it was an acceptable level of light. I'm telling you, adding these Fresnels makes all the difference in the world. The issue here is, this is a pretty cheap one. It's around $90 on Amazon. You can spend more money, of course. I really think you really got to have at least barn doors to shoot weddings, but a Fresnel is really, really nice. Not just because I think the light quality is much nicer on a Fresnel, but I really, really believe you need to be able to focus or flood your lights at weddings. It's all about control in that environment. The fact that you cannot focus the light on either of these lights and you need to spend extra money to get a Fresnel, I think is a knock against both of these lights when it comes to wedding, and definitely when you compare it to the LS60X by Aputure. When you're talking lighting at wedding filmmaking, you're really looking at a couple really key things. One of them being the ability to power via a battery, and really power for a long time. And of course, the other one is app connectivity. So this is Zy Vega. I've never done it at all. I want to see how easy it is to add light, so let's try doing that. I created a set called WFS, Wedding Film School. If you haven't subscribed or liked, go ahead and do that. Let's try to add some lights. Whoa, ah! So the cool thing is, like, immediately upon turning the app on, it seems that it's in like Bluetooth discoverability zone. All right, okay, so that just immediately popped up, which is really nice. I'm just gonna add them both. Adding devices, okay, immediately device disconnected, so that's not a good sign. Control center. All right, all devices. Yeah, it seems like this light has already become disconnected. So I'm loading my light settings again. I literally have no idea how to reset the Bluetooth on this. And it no longer is discoverable. The 100 is not having any connectivity issues. It seems to be working perfect. And it could just be this unit, and it could be that I made a mistake. But in general, not a great first experience with Zy Vega. This app gave me a lot of issues. When I tried to connect both of them, it was constantly booting one off and keeping the other. Now, it's an early version and these lights are probably early in their firmware, so it's something they could fix. But right now, I didn't have the best experience with the app, and it's not something I would trust at a wedding. The most important thing when you're talking about lighting at weddings, besides brightness and throw, is the ability to power with an external source. It's very rare at weddings when you have access to an outlet, and oftentimes I wouldn't recommend plugging it in anyway, because not only does it not look that good, but a guest might trip over it, something like that. It's just not like a set, it's live, and so you gotta be careful. Now, both of these lights can be powered via external USB power banks, but not just any USB power banks. Like, you need fast charging, high output power banks. Not just the kind you have laying around. I tried it with just a couple that we had laying in the office. I tried it with my personal little one. they did not do the job. You really need to be spending $150, $200 on a powerful, something that could charge a laptop, like a powerful USB bank. Now, why do I care about that? Well, it bothers me because me as a filmmaker, I have a lot of batteries. I have tons of batteries. I would love it if Zhiyun, like Aputure, would just kind of accommodate the batteries I already have. Aputure has a V-mount clip right on the yoke. They also include a mounting plate for Sony batteries when they ship it to you. So they're basically saying, hey, filmmaker, we know the stuff you have. We want the light to work with the stuff that you already have. Zhiyun does not do that. Now, luckily, a lot of V-mount batteries actually have a USB output on them, which means I can power this G60 with a V-mount battery, which will give me power all night. And that really matters a lot when you're at weddings. You can't be worrying about your lights just turning off mid-toast. The X100, on the other hand, does not allow that. This is my #1 beef with these lights, guys. The fact that you have this battery is awesome, but it really only lasts 30 minutes at full power. We tried it even at 50% power and it died right at an hour. So it makes me think there's some kind of artificial limitation they're putting on to make sure that it's constantly cranking out full charge. 1 hour at 50%, it's not quite bright enough and it's not quite long enough for weddings. I typically like to do the boiling the frog method when I turn on my lights at a wedding, which is turn it on at the very beginning of the night so guests don't notice it. I don't love just flashing my lights on and off all night. I just don't like doing that. So when I look at a light that I can only power for 30 minutes at max brightness, it's definitely something that gives me a lot of pause. Could I actually use this at a real wedding? Well, why don't I just power it from external source? Well, for some reason, Zhiyun made it that I actually can't do that with this X100. It's super bizarre. The G60, I can power with any of the batteries I have laying around as long as there's a USB power output. When I plug in a V-mount battery to the bottom of this, it just kind of power cycles on and flashes on and off. That makes me kind of think that maybe there's some kind of power regulation built into the battery, which is basically regulating the power before it hits the light. And it really calls into question the entire design strategy. Because it seems like all they've really done is take all the features of a light that are really useful and kind of kick them off the light. The inability to power this with any kind of normal battery that a filmmaker would have is a major knock for me when it comes to wedding filmmaking. I have had my lights on at weddings for over an hour and a half to 2 hours at many occasions. And if you get a big enough battery, that's easy to do. I cannot imagine having to go to a wedding and really be worried when you're talking those toasts going 20 minutes and you're just counting the time off, waiting for your light to just die. Now, given if I want to buy this light and I really, really want to use it, I can buy a USB power bank and I can power it externally that way and get a lot of extra life. But then the next question comes into mind, which is the value proposition. So the Aputure 60X can be had for around $400. The X100 has 3 packages, but I really recommend the middle combo pack because it comes with the battery and the Bowens mount, and that's around $350. The G60's second pack, which has the Bowens mount, is around $250. So you're talking $250, $350, $400. That might seem okay because you're like, well, this is not as bright, and so it's cheaper. This one has some knocks against it, so it's a little cheaper. Until you really consider what you need to do to get both of these lights ready for weddings. With either of them, you really need an external power source. Now, luckily with this one, you might be able to use power sources you already have, like NP or V-mount batteries plugged in via USB-C. Most of us, though, don't have a high output USB power bank, and so you're gonna need to buy that. That's about $150 to $200 out of your pocket right away. Then, you need to add some kind of barn doors, preferably with some kind of Fresnel attached. So that's 90 bucks right there. Right off the bat, in order to make either of these lights useful for weddings, you have to drop an additional $100. And that's when I start to go like, who is this light for? It doesn't really seem to be for wedding filmmakers. It seems much more like content people. Why do I say that? Well, it comes with this really, 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 really ridiculously tiny softbox. Just imagine that right on your desk and you're just doing all your sick League of Legends. You're just doing a sick League of Legends, just melting noobs. They also come with a bunch of weird little reflectors and a bunch of weird stuff like this. My point is, these are great lights for content creators. I just think you can get cheaper lights for content creators. I'm looking at something like the Forza 60 or even the Amaron 60s that can be mounted up in the ceiling, you plug them in, you leave them alone. You can record your League of Legends streams with that just fine for a similar to cheaper price. I'm looking at these, they're not as bright, but they're a little more expensive. They take a little more buy-in, and this light is just weird. Like, it does a bunch of things really well, but it also does a bunch of things really, really poorly that you really need for wedding filmmaking. So here's my summary with these lights. They're great lights for content creators, although I think you might be able to get cheaper lights that do a similar thing as long as mobility is not the top of your list. But are they great for weddings? Well, I think for some wedding filmmakers, they might work out just fine, especially this little guy. If you just find yourself lighting someone very, very close and you don't want tons of brightness, the G60 would actually be perfect for weddings because it's so tiny and it'll fit in your case, but it's just not quite bright enough, in my opinion, to be used at weddings because you really just gotta buy a bunch of extra stuff to add on to it. It just becomes very obvious that, like, out of the box, they are just not great for weddings, and you're gonna have to invest additional to make them ready to go. You're really not saving that much space with these lights. It sounds like I'm bagging on these lights, but I'm really not. I'm very impressed with them, and I'm really, really psyched that Zhiyun has kind of entered into the lighting game with some just really interesting, fresh ideas. We need more of this stuff in the space. I want to give them tons and tons of credit. And actually, if all the stuff I mentioned in this video doesn't bother you, they're pretty amazing lights, and I would highly recommend them. These are the type of lights that there's some person out there who's like, I've always wanted to have a light that I hold like this and do that. If you've always wanted a light that looked like a camera that you could walk around with, this is amazing. This is it. This is your light. If you're a wedding filmmaker who's using them in a traditional way, it just doesn't justify the cost when you can just go buy a 60X, which has a Fresnel built in, which comes with barn doors, which will just plug into the batteries you already have, and is brighter, or at least as bright as the X100. It just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. That being said, Zhiyun, all the credit in the world. You dropped into the market with a splash. You got us talking. These lights are very exciting because when you look at them, you know, if they can do this, what are they gonna do next? And I think that next light with this form factor or this form factor, hey, it could be the perfect light for wedding filmmakers. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead, drop a like, hit the bell, and of course, subscribe for the best wedding filmmaking content on YouTube. Thanks, guys.